Joining us now, Sally Satel. She is resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, practicing psychiatrist and lecturer at the Yale University School of Medicine, and editor of When Altruism Isn't Enough, the case for compensating kidney donors. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight. Sally, thanks for coming up from Washington. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Before we talk about this from a more theoretical standpoint, this is not really an academic discussion for you. You've been through this.
That's true.
Do you mind telling us the story about how you found your kidney donor?
Oh, sure. Yes. Well, as you say, my interest in this is literally organic. It grew out of my own personal experience. 2004, I found out I needed a kidney. It was kind of a surprise. And then I knew...
Why'd you need one?
I don't know. It's one of those, some cases are just called idiopathic. No one knows why they happen. But it did, and it obviously was happening over many, many years because I didn't even feel sick. But from my medical training, I knew I only had to do one thing, which is find myself someone to give me a body part, because waiting on the national transplant list, especially if you're in a major city, you've been waiting on dialysis for up to 8 or 10 years.
So what'd you do?
So actually, I told some people that I was sick, kind of hoped they would offer, and then a number of them did, and then unfortunately a number of them, in fact all of them, kind of got cold feet. It's a little hard to be angry at someone for that. It's a very delicate
You're asking
situation.
a big thing.
Yeah, actually I never even really asked. I just mentioned, and thank goodness they did offer, and that was obviously a lovely gesture, but in the end it didn't happen. So at first, when I realized I was getting kind of desperate here, of course I wished I could just buy one. Because initially I wanted to buy one because I didn't even want the emotional entanglement of of having such a great moral debt to someone. But that became a luxury preoccupation, and then I realized I've got to buy one so I can get one. And that's illegal, of course, in US and frankly in almost every country. So I actually went on a website, which is kind of like a J-date for people looking for someone to...
Instead of looking for some Jewish person to date,
right. I needed
looking for a K-date.
And it didn't even have to be, right, it didn't even have to be Jewish. And I thought I found someone, and we actually had a date literally to get the surgery. It didn't work out. And then the bottom line is, thank goodness, this glorious woman named Virginia Postrel, who's a very accomplished journalist.
We know her. She's been on this program.
Okay. And not a close friend, more of an acquaintance, actually. And she just heard from a third party that I was needed a kidney. And the next day she wrote an email, and in the subject line said, "Serious offer. I heard you need a kidney, and if I match, I'm it." And thank God for her.
And presumably you asked her at some point, why are you doing this? What was her answer?
I didn't even have to ask her, actually. From what I knew, she was such a deeply principled and compassionate person. And my personal situation was that I didn't have family members who were in a position to do it, and she knew that. And I think she was just so moved for me. And her husband, thank goodness, was as well. And you tend to forget, it's two people who have to agree to this. And I'm very grateful that he did as well. And so she did it.
Let's just clarify some of the basics here. You got 2 kidneys, but you can get away with just having one.
Yeah.
Which is why she offered. Now, did you pay her for it, or what was the transaction about?
I didn't pay her for it. I would have paid her for it, and I didn't. And of course, she didn't expect that at all. She just expected the normal gratitude that comes with sort of the most amazing thing you can do for someone. You're kind of speechless with gratitude. And so my IQ went up and my age went down. Here I am.
Well, you can't go through something like this without it presumably transforming how you view this issue after versus before. So how did your views on this change?
Yeah, they started to change the minute I needed a donor. Look, I'm a poster girl for altruism. Virginia wanted nothing, she got nothing. It was a true humane act. But there aren't enough Virginias, and there are too many of people like me. And we have been beholden to the narrative of altruism, which is a gorgeous virtue. Again, it's why I'm sitting here before you with, her kidney. But it's simply not enough. And 14 people are dying every day in the U.S., a large number, I'm sure, here as well. I know you have a big organ shortage in Canada. Too, the list in the U.S. is up to 85,000 people who are waiting.
I got the numbers here. Hang on, I'll just, as long as we're on it, I may as well read this. Here's what we've got. This, according to the Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network, 2010 figures. United States, waiting list, 93,412. Transplants, 14,000 and change, so huge discrepancy. In Canada, on the waiting list, a little over 2,600, and transplants, 1,181. So, okay, you were on a list, right, for a period of time?
Yeah, I was on the list, I guess, for about a year, and I, again, was so lucky because Virginia was timely that I didn't have to go on dialysis. That's another kind of a clinical nightmare. I mean, on the one hand, it keeps you alive. If you have liver failure, there is no intervening technology. So I'm grateful that dialysis exists, but it's, for so many people, just a crippling lifestyle. It's draining in every sense of the word. I mean, they literally drain your blood out and cleanse it, but it's also exhausting. People get infections. You die a premature death on dialysis, even though it will keep you alive. There's nothing like a transplant. But not enough people get them.
And I guess some people have got to be hooked up to it every other day or for hours at a time.
It's every other day for 4 hours.
Yeah.
There is home dialysis, but most people are in a clinic. And of course, the flip side of this, because there's a shortage in this country and everywhere, a significant trade in organs has grown up internationally, and that's its own human rights nightmare because so many of the donors are illiterate, impoverished, poorly treated, not given the money they're promised, not treated well medically, no good follow-up. So it's a disaster on both ends.
Sally, here's something you wrote as part of the introduction to When Altruism Isn't Enough, and I'm going to read this excerpt and then we'll chat a bit about it. The metaphorical bedrock of the American transplant system is altruistic giving. Organ donation, we're told, should be the ultimate gift, the gift of life, a sublime act of generosity. Givers must not expect, or in the case of deceased donors, their survivors must not expect, to be enriched in any way. That is a lovely sentiment, to be sure, but it is terribly inadequate as the basis for transplant policy. Okay, how come? Why inadequate?
For all the reasons we were talking about, the 14 people who are dying every day, the people who have to wait 8 to 10 years for a kidney, if they live that long, because half will die before they reach, the top of that list.
So inadequate to the numbers, but still, but ethically, inadequate ethically?
I think so. I think that if we can save people, we have a moral imperative to do so. And the book was about how to establish an ethically defensible and economically reasonable and practically feasible form of a regime in which people could be rewarded for saving the life of another person.
Okay, roll it out for us. How would it work?
Okay. Well, now we're talking about a first world model, okay? Countries like the US and Canada. The idea here is that it wouldn't be a one-to-one exchange. You wouldn't be buying a kidney from me. In fact, cash would probably not even be involved. It would be government regulated. And let me just lay it out right now, right tomorrow. You could, well, let's say we're in the US. You could be so moved by this discussion that you could decide, these poor folks, I want to give my kidney to the next person waiting. You could go to the University of Washington Hospital Center, say, sign me up. And they would, of course, do an extensive medical and psychiatric evaluation of you. And if they were convinced that you were well informed and healthy enough, they would give your kidney, you would undergo the surgery, and they would give your kidney to the next person waiting. And there'd be a special spot in heaven from you, and you would go home. Now, in the kind of plan that my colleagues and I have been talking about, and as people have been talking about for many years, because it's been clear that there's always been a deficit in organs, ever since we started keeping track in 1987. But the only difference would be you would give your kidney and you might get a tax credit, or you might get a contribution to a 401k account, or possibly a tuition voucher for your child, something like that.
We don't have 401ks here by that name anyway, so you mean like a retirement savings plan?
A pension, yes.
Okay. The way to organize this, I guess, a number of different alternatives here. You got, I guess, a free market system, like anything else. You got a regulated market system, or you got the government running it. Now, I guess you think the best way to do it is with that second option. Is that right? But what are the pros and cons of all the different options?
Actually, it was kind of the third option that we talked about,
yeah?
in that it's an in-kind exchange, but it is government run. And the main impetus behind that, frankly, is because it's most palatable. A free market is just politically unfeasible. I mean, we have that. We have surrogate mothers, and they enter into a binding contract with someone who's interested in having the baby through them. And if there is a violation of that contract, they can enforce the law. So it's not as if we don't have contracts and private exchanges already ongoing in terms of exchanges that involve body parts, body products, body activities for certain. And we pay for plasma in our country. In fact, the U.S. is the biggest exporter of plasma in the world. We do have blood shortages because we don't pay for blood. I mean, the principles of economics will follow through into this arrangement as well.
But at the end of the day, is it the doctor who decides who gets it first?
There's an algorithm that's it's established by the United Network for Organ Sharing, and the algorithm is it's hard to, you know, these are hard to come up with.
Right.
They're basically largely based on, for kidneys, they're in large part based on how long you've waited. But that's because dialysis exists to essentially keep people on a list. If you needed a kidney or a heart, it'd be depending on how sick you are.
Okay. Is there any evidence to suggest that if you put these incentives in place, you'll get more people to contribute?
Well, as I was saying before, we don't have a blood plasma shortage. We don't have a shortage of cadavers that medical students work on and that laboratories need to develop certain devices. And that's in large part because we will pay for the burial. That's a little different, though. You're dead there. You're not going to feel anything. This is a bigger deal. In fact, actually, we didn't talk about another way to increase deceased donation, which is by something called a forward contract. It's developed by an economist at George Mason University. It's very elegant. Basically, right now, you would sign a paper saying that when I die, if my organs are usable, my state will get $5,000 or $10,000, and that's another way of doing it. And so that would be much more analogous to the situation with the cadaver, in which case we'll pay for a dead body that, granted, you know, enhanced learning and research, but we won't pay for a dead body if several people could live as a result of being able to retrieve organs from
Ethical inconsistency in your view?
I would say so.
Okay, here's from James Chapman of the British Medical Journal, who wrote a couple of years ago, ethical proponents of organ sales advocate a regulated market managed by government to buy kidneys on behalf of the community. The last vestige of human altruism is at stake. Which family member will donate if the government will pay someone else $100,000 to provide a kidney? Which recipient will risk a family member's health when government will pay? And if a kidney is worth money before death, families or individuals will demand money for consent to retrieval of organs after death. Surely the payment must be higher after death because you can use the organs that cannot be retrieved from live people. You know, I guess part of the argument he's making here is that this will be the end of altruistic giving if you go this route.
I could write a book responding to all the points he made.
Well,
but
don't write a book. Just give me
basically, the point is, you know, as I said, I can't say more wonderful things about the altruistic impulse. But the whole point of our transplant system is not to provide a mechanism for people to be altruistic. That is a means. The end is to have more organs and save more lives. That's the bottom line. And if we can get more organs by rewarding people who are willing to save someone's life, along with altruistic donation, that's not going to dry up overnight. I would also say to him that if he's ever really interviewed people who've given organs or thought about it, there is a very big side, a very dark side, I should say, to altruism. Because when it's the only mode of exchange involved, gee, Steve, your brother, I know he really never treated you very well. You mean you're not going to give him a kidney? Mm-hmm. So much for you in the will. Or what kind of brother are you? I mean, lots of emotional blackmail there's
potential.
An enormous amount of that. In fact, that's why hospitals are wholly prepared to give what's called medical alibis, where they say, look, Steve, we understand you have to save face here. So you let us know whether or not you would like to go through with it. You're medically qualified, but if you don't want to, you let us know. And we'll
make something up.
Yes, they do. And I frankly can understand why they do that, and I think that's the right thing to do.
Do you get concerned about opening the door here to some kind of black market system? I know there's a black market that probably already exists, but might this exacerbate it?
I think just the opposite. In fact, the cure for a black market is a transparent legal means of exchange. If anything, this is the cure for it. In fact, when people, I know a number of critics have said, they've been to countries, Manila, in fact, I've been to Manila as well, where they've witnessed the depredations of the black market, and as if they're arguing with me, and I say, you're making my point. That's exactly the problem. If we bring this above board, if we deal with willing, well-informed people, if they are protected before and after they're given they give the organ, if the treatment is first rate, and if they are rewarded in a manner that is commensurate with the significant sacrifice they've made, how is anyone exploited?
Okay, let me try this one last thing. We'll finish up on this. I don't know if this is the case in the United States, but I think it is in Canada. We are squeamish in Canada talking about money and body parts, or money and organs, or there's something about the Canadian Medicare system that this just might not pass the stink test. You know, the whole commodification of body parts. It's not that you're not making the case well, it's that this is a very, it's just a weird conversation to be having.
It's true.
You want to speak to that?
You're right, it is. I mean, I'm so used to it by now, but of course, for people hearing it the first time, I appreciate that. A lot of people say, yeah, but a lot say, yes, that makes perfect sense, but you're right. A lot of people say, I don't know, and then they ask the questions, well, what about the exploitation aspect? And we walk through how, you know, it would be protected, third-party regulated, and this kind of thing. And they're still left with a residual of, you know, of unease. And then I suppose my request to them is, you know, I understand that this is a novel idea and that it touches nerves that are really quite profound, but considering what's at stake here and how many innocent people are dying, really, could you just try to put that aside, try to tolerate it so other people could live?
How's your health?
Good, thank you.
Glad to hear it. Sally Satel, it's good of you to join us here at TVO tonight. Safe back to Washington for you when you go.
Thank you very much.